Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a crazy evening last night. Yesterday we talked about day one of the RNC convention. All of the fear, all of the divisiveness, all of the, hey, the others are coming. You need to defend yourself. MS-13 around every corner. And we have this horrible tragedy, completely avoidable in the city of Kenosha, Wisconsin. Sunday, you had the shooting of another unarmed black man by a white policeman. This time, I mean, you look at each one of these videos, more egregious than the next. 7 shots in the back at point blank range while the man's kids are watching. I don't see the justification for it. And yes, people took to the streets, and yes, there was rioting, and there was looting, and there was, yes, the things that we have come to expect whenever one of these things happens. And yes, this is, the voices of the unheard expressing their anger. Do I agree? No. But do I understand? Yes. And sadly, what happened last night was predictable, as we now find out in the aftermath that militia groups were organizing and bringing in their gun nuts into a situation that's already a powder keg. And look, we've been talking about this happening at some point for a while now. Every time one of these things pops up, you expect the white supremacists, you expect the militia types to show up with their military garb so that they can play, imitation soldier or wannabe cop. I mean, there's nothing worse in my view than a wannabe cop, because they were even too crazy to become an actual policeman. So now it's now their fetish, and that's what happened last night. You end up with a bunch of these people who have fetishized being the power, command, being in control, and they descended upon Kenosha, Wisconsin from out of state as this 17-year-old murderer who is now going to be convicted and spend the rest of his life behind bars, bought into, showed up with his AR-15, and he was going to, according to his own words, he was going to protect. He says it's his job. It's his job to protect the business that he was in front of, which I guess was a car lot of some sort. He said, it's my job also to protect people. If someone is hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle. I got to protect myself, obviously, he says. And when you go into a situation, this is one of those weird moments where you go, why are you even there? Why did you come from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin to intervene in a situation that has nothing to do with you? Other than it's the fetish. It's the, we're going to defend liberty and freedom and we're going to defend all this stuff. And it's crazy because there's this mindset. And again, Monday night's RNC convention, pushed a lot of these buttons, pushed a lot of this stuff on people who are clearly uneasy right now. You had a former alderman from Kenosha start a Facebook group or an event calling for, these kind of, people with this mentality, the cop fetishists, to descend on Kenosha. You had another militia group who sent a letter to the local police chief, telling him that, I'm the head of the local militia, that. We're mobilizing. And we've got 3,000 RSVPs, he says. Our effort has made national media. I ask that you do not have your officers tell us to go home under threat of arrest, as you have done in the past. We are willing to talk to the KPD and open a discussion. He says this is evident, and no matter how many officers, deputies, or other law enforcement officers that are here, you will be outnumbered. Now, I don't know if that's a threat. Again, I'm not reading this man's mind. Is he threatening the police, saying there's 3,000 of us and we're going to outnumber you with our guns, or the people in the citizens in the streets who are protesting, that they're the ones being outnumbered? But either way, it's scary when you've got a local militia leader, basically threatening the local police chief. Also reaching out to the local sheriff saying, hey, deputize us. We've always fetishized, we've always tingly in the panties over being a deputy, so we could use our guns legally. And I thought it was interesting in the press conference that the sheriff gave, he went into saying, look, this is exactly what this shooting is exactly why you don't deputize people, especially these people. In fact, his response was, oh, hell no, which is the right response. And if you watch some of the videos that are out there, and there are a bunch of them on Twitter of people, recording the police in their armored vehicles, which again, I still think is part of the problem. Handing out water to these militia types who are walking around with AR-15s in their full military costumes, thanking them for being there, saying, we really appreciate you being here. Only to have, hours later, this 17-year-old take two people's lives and shoot a third person. Do you think that's not going to make it worse? Do you think that escalating the situation by adding more people with guns into it, do you think that's going to make it better? Now, some people think, yes, absolutely. We need to come down with iron fist force. And we got a president that thinks that. In fact, he is all tingly in the panties right now as Governor Evers has agreed to allow him to send in his federal troops. It's going to get ugly in Kenosha. The sad reality is we've still done nothing to change the fact that another black man on our city streets was shot in the back 7 times. I mean, I watched that video and I go, there's literally no justification other than if he had a gun and he was pointing it at him and his life was truly in danger. 7 times at point blank range in the back. And yet this has now overshadowed all of that. And I say that's by design. Because then we're no longer talking about the reason that all this is going on. We now create an environment where it's about the reaction. And it's about burning vehicles and burning buildings. It's about things being destroyed. It's about property. It's not about the systematic brutality that our police departments have had. That comes from the top. This isn't just a few bad apples. This is an institution that's been built this way. And I've been talking about this for years. The militarization of our police departments, the fact that we treat them like mini armies, the fact that we equip them like mini armies, the fact that we've given them the toys that we have used in places like Iraq for crowd control. That's what's created this. The fact that there are armored vehicles riding up and down the streets in Wisconsin, while out of one side of their mouth telling people to go home, you're violating curfew, you will be arrested. Out of the other side of their mouth, they're throwing bottles of water to and thanking these armed insurgents from out of the area for them being there. Do you not see a problem with that? Now, look, I'm of the mindset, if you wanted to enforce your curfew, I get that. If you believe that the protest was unlawful, that's something you fight in court. We go through that process. That's why we have a process. But to, on the spot, say, you, protester, you go home. We will use every bit of the law to crash down upon you. You, black protester, you go home. You, white insurgents who showed up with your AR-15 and your soldier costume, why, thank you for being here. It's so nice of you to make the trip. Here, have some of our wonderful water. That I'm struggling with that, and I don't know how you justify it. Oh, I know. They're protecting the property. That's the argument. They're going to protect that property. And you go, well, where were the people to protect all of these folks the guy who was shot 7 times in the back? The police are supposed to be there to protect. Remember, it's usually written somewhere on the car, protect and serve, something like that. We are going in all of the wrong directions. And it's frightening because I said this, over a month ago to a guest who had asked me, what do you see as the path towards Trump's victory? And I said this, these protests getting out of hand, there being all of the chaos that we expected. I mean, the fact that Kenosha happened yesterday instead of, weeks ago, is pretty amazing to me. And will it happen again? Yes. As long as you continue to have these dynamics and continue to ignore the root cause of all of this, nothing's going to change. It's only going to escalate even more. Here's the thing. Buildings are burning and cars are being destroyed and windows are breaking now because for the last 20, 30 years, the Mother May I kind of organizing the black community has been doing around these issues, and they have been. They have been asking and begging and pleading for police reform for decades. It goes back to when I was a kid growing up in the projects. And they all fell on deaf ears. And I say all the time, the only time that things change is when the king thinks his head can be on a platter. The only moment that the wealth class gives a little bit to the poor peon workers is when the pitchforks come out. Well, this is a moment where the pitchforks are a couple of broken windows. This is a moment where, sadly, this is what it has to come to. And while I don't condone it, I do understand it. And as long as we do nothing about it, it's going to continue. And predictably, it will get worse. You don't need a crystal ball to figure that out. You don't even need to be halfway smart. It just is what it is. We got a lot to get to tonight. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Tom Hartman's going to be here, share some thoughts, maybe on this. Also, he's got a new book out, The Hidden History of Monopolies, how big business destroyed the American dream. We'll be back with Tom Hartman after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Teamsters in Minneapolis defied martial law. They stopped scab trucks, forcing the release of their strike leaders. Armed with bayonets and machine guns, the National Guard had patrolled the streets for nearly a week. They seized scores of strikers and union leaders and threw them into military stockades. Drivers were outraged. They defied Governor Olson and Major General Walsh, who, on behalf of the Citizens Alliance and trucking bosses, were determined to break the strike. Soon after strikers were imprisoned, drivers began chasing scab trucks across the city. Multiple reports poured in of picketers forcing trucks to stop. Some unloaded their cargo onto bridges. Others chased, captured, and damaged the scab trucks. Strikers ripped ignition wires out, forced scabs from the wheel, and then disappeared before police and the National Guard could arrive to retaliate. In just 3 hours, strikers had overturned nearly 70 trucks. Unable to stop the superior force of striking drivers, Bill Brown, Vincent, and Miles Dunn were ordered unconditionally released from the military stockades. Now, employers, the governor, and other strike-breaking agencies were eager to propose peace to federal mediators. But they proposed to scrap the terms of their earlier May agreement. In response, the leaders of Local 574 issued a general strike call. In it, they asked, quote, "Is there one man so blind as not to see that if 574 is allowed to go down to defeat under the brutal hammering of military despotism, the whole labor movement of the city will have been dealt a mortal blow? Union men, brothers, sisters, fellow workers, what are you going to do about it? We appeal to you for solidarity." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the crackpot on Monday night who stirred the pot even more, this Matt Gaetz, who, Florida, what the hell? The guy who said they're going to invite MS-13 to live right next door to you. They're coming. The others are coming. Today tweeted out, "The mob wants to destroy America. We need patriots," he says, "who will defend her." Is that a defense of this 17-year-old kid who shot and killed 2 people last night and shot and wounded? I guess the guy's going to lose an arm. A third person, is that the defense? Sadly, this is the re-election campaign. Just infuriating and crazy. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on his most recent book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. I've asked Tom Hartman to come talk with us, radio host and author. This is like the 3rd book I've had him on to talk about. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me.
Good little book. I wanted to talk about this, but first I want to get your thoughts on this tweet by Gaetz, because this has just got me completely sideways. The mob wants to destroy America, Tom. We need patriots with their guns to show up and shoot people down in the streets.
Yeah, they're trying to rerun the 1968 Nixon campaign. That summer, Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and the cities were on fire that fall, and Nixon basically ran a campaign in '68 of video footage of black people burning buildings. And Trump wanted that, but he didn't quite have it, so he sent some guys out to Portland and said, "Hey, can you make this happen for me?" And it's like the more they can stir things up. And so you get these tweets that are like saying to these militia guys who've been around forever. I knew these Michigan militia guys in the '70s when I was a kid.
Sure.
But now they're like, "Okay, we've been activated. It's time to go fight against those brown and black people that we've been warned about all these years. Maybe we'll kill some Jews too." Literally, that's how they're thinking, and that's what Trump wants. Frankly, the more chaos, the better for him.
Yeah, and it's what we saw on Monday night. As that was really hate fest, scare the hell out of Whitey fest.
Yeah.
Because hey, they're coming to crush the suburbs, Tom.
Yeah. I'm terrified.
But here's the thing, and I had talked about this the other day, that there are all these different groups. There's the Black Lives Matter group, there's the Blue Lives Matter group, there's the All Lives Matter group, and I've taken the position that the people who run this country don't give a tinker's damn about any of them, and that really no lives matter. And the fact of the matter
Unless
is,
they're rich.
in my view, that while we're literally shooting each other in the streets and ripping each other apart, corporate America is as happy as can be because we're not talking about them. That's why I think your book is so important, to point out exactly how corporate America has screwed over the American worker and destroyed the American dream in the process.
Great segue. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, in Trump world, and frankly in Republican world, I mean, this goes back to really the Nixon presidency. If you're not rich, if you're not connected to a giant corporation, if you can't give money to them, they have no interest in you, period, full stop. And they had to cobble, but that's a lousy campaign slogan. So they had to look for people who really didn't feel like they were being well represented by basically any part of the political spectrum. And so they got the men who want to control women, the anti-abortion vote. They would get the guys, the gun fetishists, the small penis gun club, bring them in, and eventually they put together a coalition. But you call this in any parliamentary government, you call this a governing coalition, not a political party.
Yeah. Because as I talked about the other day, I said, have you ever seen the movie Hoffa? There's this great scene in the movie where they had the RTA bus strike, and the workers were coming there. They're crossing the railroad tracks. They were going to picket out in front of the RTA building there in Cleveland. And you had way up on the top of the building, you saw the police chief, the local government officials, the corporate officials. They're all looking down on the crowds. And it was this great scene where all the doors open up and the thugs with their, that they brought in from out of town came with their clubs. And it's just this mass of humanity who's just beating the tar out of each other. And there's this moment where they look down and they go, our work is done. They close the curtains and they go back to their drinks. This is exactly what's happening with Trump and with the people who are running this country. And the question I have is, what's it going to take for us, black, white, brown, to realize that we're the pawns in all this, that we don't matter, and until we stop this kind of nonsense and deal with some of these problems, we're going to continue to get ripped off at every turn. We're going to get crappier jobs with no benefits. Life is going to get much more difficult, not just for black and brown people, but for all of us. When do we wake up from this?
Well, I think the reason why you see so much Sturm and Drang and distraction coming out of Donald Trump is that Americans have started waking up to this. We're at the tail end of a 40-year failed experiment with Reaganism and supply-side economics. Something that the last time it was tried in 1920 crashed the entire economy for a generation, and is doing it again. And people have figured out in 40 years they haven't had a pay increase. In fact, household income is the same as it was 40 years ago. But 40 years ago, the average household had 1.1 people working. Right now, it's 2.3. So individual wages have dropped almost in half in 40 years.
Yep.
I mean, this is what the Reagan Revolution brought us. This is what the Republican Party brought us. And frankly, a few conservative Democrats, but by and large, this has been entirely the Republicans' shtick. And from Reagan and Bush negotiating NAFTA and rolling out all that stuff. I mean, this was all Republican stuff. And Trump, if he's going to survive, he's got to cause us to forget all that.
Yeah, but here we're in this moment where, yesterday we had Chuck Collins on the program talking about, how our top 12 wealthiest people in the country have a combined wealth of over $1 trillion. How our billionaire class has seen nearly $800 billion increase in their wealth. Monopolies are getting, Wall Street's fat and happy, and the monopolies who run this country, we've kind of forgotten. They're doing just great. While 50 million people still don't have jobs, millions of people have lost their health insurance and are worried about paying the rent next month. We're really in a pickle here.
We are. And the average American family is spending $5,000 a year in a monopoly tax, essentially. We pay more for drugs than anybody in the world. We pay more for internet service than anybody in the world. We pay more for airfare than any other developed country in the world. I mean, pick your poison, right? Right down the list, pretty much everything, because there's, prior to Reagan, you could visit any small town in America and know where you were, because you would there's the Biloxi, Mississippi diner, and there's the Biloxi Bank, and everything was local. It was locally owned. A lot of these businesses have been multi-generational family businesses.
Yep.
And when Reagan in '82 stopped enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act, he started the great homogenization of America, the absolute destruction of small and medium-sized businesses, the inability now of to start new small companies that compete. And if you do have success with a small company, then the giant monopolies will simply buy you out, like Zuckerberg did with Instagram. So this is us being screwed constantly. I mean, the average American is paying like between $60 and $80 a month for internet service. Twice to 10 times faster internet service is available in most of the European countries for somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $35 a month. And in some countries, you'll get on top of that cell phone service or cable TV. It's just as one example, we pay twice as much for drugs, literally, than any other developed country in the world. Literally, twice as much. Hospitalization. I mean, it just goes on, and it's because each one of these sectors have become monopolized. It's technically an oligopoly when you've got 3 or 4 or 5 companies that control more than 80% of a sector, but they function like a monopoly. If Delta raises their prices $5 on a New York to LA trip, United does it 30 seconds later because they're all dancing in concert with each other, and that's how we get screwed.
Yeah, but Tom, we're Americans, damn it. We pay full price.
Right. Yeah. So
wasn't that the argument for the prescription drug bill? That we've got to pay full price. We can't possibly negotiate.
I don't. You're right. They did pass that law when they put in the Medicare Part D. The Republicans demanded that even though the government, the Medicare Part D, even though Medicare might buy millions and millions of tablets of penicillin or aspirin or whatever it may be, they have to pay the retail price as if they just walked into a retail pharmacy and bought one tablet. So we get hugely screwed there. But I don't recall any debate around it, Rick. It just seemed like, it all of a sudden was a done deal.
Yeah, because you and I don't have lobbyists. We don't have the resources to fund, the multi-billion-dollar lobby industry that has got a death grip over our democracy.
There you go. And that's, once again, the monopoly is not just about destroying competition. That's the principal characteristic of a monopoly, is that it is designed to destroy competition or prevent competition. But the other characteristic is that it's a massive aggregation of political power because of its massive aggregation of wealth, and that's why it's so hard to extract monopolies.
So what's the way forward in this? I mean, I've been talking about this. I know you've been talking about this for, we've been doing this show 15 years now. This has been one of the things that has been essential tenet of everything that drives me insane is we talk about competition, we talk about risk in the market, we talk about all of these things, and yet our policy leaders have done everything they can do to take risk out of investment because anytime there's a downturn, we make Wall Street fat and happier. And the competition isn't there because, a handful of companies own virtually everything anyway. As you pointed out, go into any small town, there's going to be some crappy Applebee's and maybe some other franchise. What's the way forward?
We need to start enforcing the laws that are on the books. Reagan in the early 80s suspended, he ordered the Justice Department, the Commerce Department, and the Securities and Exchange Commission to stop enforcing the antitrust laws. And no president has said turn it back on again. The last time there was a serious enforcement of the antitrust laws was when Richard Nixon ordered AT&T broken up and Jimmy Carter finished the job. And so, we just need to go back to enforcing the laws that we already have on the books.
But what do you say to the person? And the argument I get back is, we need to streamline, these businesses. We need to do away with redundancies and understand. I'm a big fan of redundancy. That's people's jobs. Those are livelihoods. What do you say to that argument?
Well, it's a nonsensical argument. It's not healthy for our economy. It's not healthy for our democracy, for some of the reasons that I mentioned. But it's the way it works with monopoly. When Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act, what happened was these masters of the universe guys, Michael Milken, they called themselves M&A artists, merger and acquisition artists, started just jamming companies together. So they'd take 3 airlines. And those 3 airlines, each one had its own separate HR department, its own separate accounting department, its own separate marketing department, its own separate reservation system, and jam them all together. You can lay off 30% of your workforce. Yeah. So, it's more efficient, and it makes a lot more money for the one small group of directors and stockholders who now own this mega corporation. But all these people got laid off. And what did it do for the economy? Nothing. Now that they've got monopoly pricing, they increase the price to us, so we get screwed, and they turn it all into profit, for themselves. I mean, it's all going to this very small group at the top. I'm with you. There's a chapter in the book called "In Praise of Inefficiency." I think that having small local businesses around the country is a really healthy thing. And what you see is that the vitality that we had in our economy prior to Reagan is largely gone now. It's largely just these monopolistic behemoths eating our lunch while they buy off our politicians.
Yeah, and the other thing that they do is, like you said, they jam three companies together. Usually what they do is they saddle one with all the debt. They cut them off to die, and then they reap the benefits of not having the debt. And usually the company they cut off to die, and we saw this in the mining industry, it's the union company, the one with the pensions and the health care. It's those guys who get screwed, and the taxpayers end up footing a huge portion of the bill as well. So it's all bad for we, the working people. But for them, I guess it's good if you can get away with it.
Yeah. Well, they've been getting away with it for 40 years. And like I said, I think the American people have figured out the con. Weirdly, this is part of how Donald Trump got elected. What his pitch was, the economy's rigged and you've been being screwed, and these bankers are screwing you and the big corporations are screwing you, and, et cetera, et cetera. And it was true. The problem is he just made things worse.
Yeah.
He was just lying through his teeth, as he does, literally everything.
Every word out of his mouth. And not to mention, he was screwing us. I mean, there are hundreds of stories out there of him screwing over businesses. The book, again, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream, written by New York Times bestselling author Tom Hartman. Where can we get this?
Anywhere. Anywhere. Anywhere you can buy a book, you can.
There we go. Anywhere you can buy a book. We'll try and get links out so folks can take a look at it. Last question I've got for you: is Biden the guy that's going to redo the Sherman Antitrust Act? Is he a guy? Because look, there are a lot of folks saying he's a centrist, he's a corporatist. Biden going to be that guy?
Well, at least he's not a fascist. Number one. Number two, I think we need to keep some historical perspective. I am not a fan of the great man theory of history. I don't believe that it depends on the person; it depends on the time. Franklin Roosevelt ran for president in 1932 on a platform of balancing the federal budget. How did that work out, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, he came into office, the times demanded he rise to them. And frankly, Jack Kennedy ran on a very similar platform. Lyndon Johnson, who with the Great Society brought us Medicare and Medicaid and the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, didn't run on any of that stuff. Ran on basically a conservative mealy-mouthed agenda. So I'm not so worried about what he's pitching or who he is right now. I'm more concerned about, how many of us are going to sign up to push him in the right direction once he becomes president, God willing.
Yeah, that will be me. I hope we learned our lesson from 2009 when everyone broke their arms, patting themselves on the back, electing Barack Obama, and went home, and we didn't get the things that we wanted and needed. But, Tom, I appreciate the time. Good book. I hope folks will take a look at it.
Great talking with you, Rick, as always. Thanks so much for having me on your program.
Thanks so much, Tom Hartman. Again, the book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream. Make sure you check it out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1839. That was the day that the Amistad sailed into Long Island, New York. The Amistad served as a Spanish slave ship. 53 captives, led by an enslaved rice farmer by the name of Joseph Sink, had revolted against their captors and taken control of the ship. They came from what is now Sierra Leone, Africa. They had endured the brutal Middle Passage on a Portuguese slave ship, the Tacora. They had landed in Havana, Cuba, where they were transferred to the Amistad. From there, they were supposed to sail to a Cuban sugar plantation. The transaction was illegal. Most of the major slave destinations in North and South America had outlawed bringing in newly enslaved people. But since existing slave labor was still used in these areas, the illegal slave trade continued. On July 2nd, the African captives escaped their chains and set upon their captors before they could load their guns. They killed the ship's captain. The Africans demanded to be returned to Sierra Leone. The U.S. Navy intercepted the Amistad as it sailed up the U.S. coast. The Africans were thrown into prison and charged with murder. The case garnered national attention and made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Former President John Quincy Adams presented the defense for the accused. The court found in favor of the Africans. 35 were returned home. The others had died while incarcerated or at sea. The Amistad became the subject of a 1997 film by Steven Spielberg. And while the Amistad became famous, it was not the only one. Similar uprisings were attempted on hundreds of slave ships during this era. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, I'm still kind of surprised. Maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm still kind of surprised at the police chief in Kenosha's, comments during that press conference. Going, well, had they just followed the curfew and gone home, they wouldn't be dead. I mean, this is like the ultimate in blaming the victim. Had you just gone home, you'd be fine. And, look, I know there are a bunch of people who are going to see if they had just gone home. But, what's interesting is some of the videos that I've seen of the cops going by yelling at people to honor the curfew and go home. They didn't say the same thing to the kid with the gun. In fact, none of the people in the video that I saw were told to leave the gas station that they had come from another state to protect. So I'm kind of curious of why. This whole thing is just an entire mess. And again, a failure of leadership from the top all the way down. And look, Monday night, all we heard from the president was divisiveness and division and be afraid and stoking the fear. Are we surprised that just a night later, this is what happens? And here to share some thoughts on this this insanity, I've asked our good friend Corey Pennebaker to come talk with us. Corey is the treasurer of the DNC Black Caucus. He is also my go-to gun sanity guy. Corey, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on.
So let's just start with, preventable tragedy, in my view. This should have never been allowed to happen. This is the kind of stuff that, during all of this, has been very predictable, and what I'll say is I'm only surprised it's taken this long.
So both the shooting from last night and the shooting from Sunday night, when Jacob Blake was shot at point-blank range 7 times in his back, both of these incidents were preventable and did not need to happen. But I'm unfortunately and sadly not surprised that it is when you have a president who I think is a flat-out racist, who is engaging and stoking the flames of armed folks like the murderer from last night to make them so enraged at the other. How many times have we heard Donald Trump talking about outside agitators coming in? That murderer from last night came from Illinois into our great state, into where the protests were, to cause trouble. We are in a situation right now where you have folks who value property more than they value black lives. And you can't even get these folks to say Black Lives Matter, but yet they'll come up here with their guns to defend a gas station. We can rebuild a storefront. Those 2 folks that got shot and killed last night aren't coming back. That is a travesty. And the same people will tell you that they're pro-life. It's nonsense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're finding out now that this event was, that all of the call for these armed people to come to Kenosha was done by a former alderman in Kenosha, this Kevin Mathewson, who being reported by the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, who created a Facebook event called Armed Citizens to Protect Our Lives and Property. And now we find that this was not just, hey, let's go grab our guns and go show up. This was actually an event that was organized.
Right. But think about this, though. He didn't ask for folks to come protect black lives. He's asking for them just to protect their lives, just white lives, and just storefronts. But our lives don't matter to them. Where is the rhetoric from the NRA, the jackbooted thug rhetoric that they would espouse back in the day, talking about when the police impact white folks? But when black folks get shot and killed, nah, so what? Now we need more white people to come in with guns and defend our property. Who's defending us here? Why aren't they, been out of shape about black folks being shot and killed? I've read a statistic the other day that was, only 3 days since George Floyd was murdered, and 8 minutes and 46 seconds that he had a knee on his neck. Only 3 days since then has a cop not killed a black person. That is ridiculous to me. And the fact that you have people calling for this tells you how little they actually value, not just black lives, but lives in general. They just want to fester and foster their aggression. They have been trained and brainwashed to be angry at the other. That's it.
Yeah.
If they don't like you, you are worthy of death. There is something inherently and fundamentally wrong in that concept. Nobody is calling for, from their side, an end to these kinds of situations of brutality where you see a young brother get shot 7 times in his back. Just a few years ago, Dontre Hamilton was shot 14 times, a few hundred feet from where I am right now. 12 of those shots were in his back. Where is the NRA? Where is this stupid alderman when things like that happen? They're only worried about property, not about actually saving people's lives and keeping communities safe. Because if they were, they would ask for ways to make change so that these things shouldn't happen. I know that being a police officer is a hard thing to do. I understand that, and I appreciate cops. There are more good cops than bad cops. You and I have talked about this before. There are. I don't dispute that. But when you have bad cops behaving like you've seen, like the ones on Sunday and the ones offering these armed agitators last night, there's something wrong there. They aren't valuing us. They just want to see the other folks with the guns keep us in line. I'm not having that anymore.
Yeah, and you look at the fact that the NBA canceled all of its games because a lot of the players now are coming out and saying, this is ridiculous. I mean, there were a number of comments today by players who have said, this is ridiculous, in much more coarse and non-FCC language, and rightly so. I mean, and
absolutely,
Sunday night when this happened, I go, is it possible that we can have a day where this doesn't happen? And I guess the question then comes back to, does it change in leadership? Does Donald Trump being ousted, does Joe Biden administration make this right? Should Biden go to Kenosha? Is this one of those moments?
I think it would make a huge impact when you have someone as powerful as the president asking for calm. That's the kind of leadership you need, not stoking those kinds of flames. So yes, I would think that Joe Biden would know what the right thing to do. And here's a guy who knows what tragedy is like and can empathize not just with the community, but with Jacob Blake's family, with his 3 children that watched him be shot 7 times in his back, or empathize with the families of the 2 people who were shot and killed last night, and the other person that was shot and apparently going to lose his arm. He would know what empathy is like. Instead, you have someone who wants to agitate. Donald Trump feeds on this kind of turmoil and tragedy. He wants these things to happen. To him, this is like the beginnings of a civil war. Yeah. He wants all of us to be angry with each other. I don't want that. I don't believe Joe Biden wants that. I don't believe decent people want that. But there is a minor subset of our culture right now who is just so angry at whatever, something stupid, and they think they can take their aggression out on us because Donald Trump has given them license to do so.
Yeah, sadly, the sick joke, and it's not even a joke. I mean, it's one of those things where you could probably even see it happening, where this 17-year-old kid who shot these 3 people would be the one giving Donald Trump away on Thursday night. He'd be the one, doing the keynote, and that's just, right. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just kind of, it's ridiculous. It's all the kinds of farcical, but sadly, not all that far out of the realm of possible.
Yeah, I mean, you just had the other night the 2 people from St. Louis who's got a speaking slot at the RNC, and their only qualification is waving a gun at black people.
Yeah,
I mean, what you're saying on the right is really like I said a minute ago. They don't honestly and obviously care about people of color. I mean, they want to keep people afraid. I mean, their entire narrative is making folks who live in the suburbs and housewives and things like that, suburban moms, afraid of people of color in the city. So you go buy more guns. But I'm really struck by the silence of groups like the NRA, where you see these kinds of acts of violence, but yet they're not worried about us protecting ourselves, right? They're not worried about, like, why shouldn't black folks be armed in case police attack us? I don't think that's right, but I'm just shocked that they're not doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, I was going to ask you about,
was shot.
this is where my mind immediately went after reading the stories, because I saw some of the on Twitter last night. Some of the images of these before the shooting happened. There were images of these people showing up with their guns, and this I guess has happened in other places as well.
Yeah.
And immediately my mind went to that image of the 1,000 black people walking up the Stone Mountain, Georgia. I'm going, is this our future, to where these protests are no longer going to be mainly mindset peaceful, but being armed to the teeth to ensure that they are?
So, and that's honestly where I hope we don't end up, right? Because that is only a pure recipe for disaster. You're going to have more and more shootings, more and more gun deaths. We have enough as it is. We cannot support and sustain a society that allows and encourages, in many ways, this kind of deadly epidemic of gun violence. We need to put an end to this. We need to be able to exercise our free speech rights and be able to protest when there is an injustice. And preventing us from doing so is denying our constitutional rights. And I want folks to really grasp this and understand that, folks, if they're angry, appreciate why they're angry, rather than trying to make it worse by injecting more aggression into the equation. That is happening far too frequently. You're seeing people more concerned and more outraged by property damage and the fact that sports teams are canceling events than they are about a black man being shot 7 times in his back. That is really a sad examination of our society right now. That is how much we've deteriorated as decent human beings. Like, a basketball game is going to piss you off so much that you forget the reason why it's happening.
No, you're right. But here's the thing. I mean, there are people who are fixated on the broken glass, and I'll be honest, I'm uncomfortable with the rioting and the looting. Look, I'm all in favor of protesting, but when you start burning things down and you start knocking things over, even I'm a little uncomfortable with this. I understand it, but it's one of those things that the real reason that you're out there gets lost in. This now becomes the story. Or am I off base? I mean, is there a justification for burning these storefronts and doing the stuff that they're doing that maybe people are missing?
Well, I mean, if folks want to turn this into, this building got burned down or these windows got broken again, they're focusing on the opposite of why it's happening. They're not concerned at all about black men, black folks. I mean, Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her bed, right? They're not concerned with that. I believe if you address the why, the consequence of these actions will stop. People are angry and are hurt because of these things that are continuing to happen. And we're seeing it now. I mean, and just consider this. We're only seeing some of them, right? We're seeing a fraction of them. There's so many more folks that get shot, whether they're wounded or get killed, that we don't see. But yet they're mad about a building being burned down. Those buildings can be rebuilt. These families cannot be. 3 kids watch their dad shot in the back. They have to live with that for the rest of their lives. Their dad is currently paralyzed, and they're not sure if he's going to walk again. So for the rest of their lives, when they look at their father, where he does get to walk again, and he's limping, or he's in a wheelchair, they will be constantly reminded of being in that car watching this shooting happen. And you got folks worried about a building. A building. Come on now. If we can fix buildings, we can put new sticks of wood up, we can put new planes of glass in. You cannot replace a spine. You cannot replace a parent. You can't replace the 2 people who were shot and killed last night. The brother who's going to lose his arm, that ain't coming back. Those buildings can. And there's something incredibly wrong and inhumane if all we're going to do is talk about buildings. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you. This 17-year-old kid, and I shouldn't say kid, this 17-year-old premeditated murderer. As I'm reading the laws, and look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert on this, but just a cursory examination, it looks like you in Wisconsin and in Illinois, you can't buy a gun until you're 18. My thought is how did this kid get this gun? And are we going to go after whoever this gun belongs to? Because the kid didn't buy it. Shouldn't we be holding them accountable as well?
I am confident that Wisconsin's Attorney General, Josh Call, who is a not only a decent man, but an outstanding Attorney General, is going to make sure that the law is going to be applied as it should be. And if there are laws that have been broken due to the 17-year-old murderer's access to that gun, then he should be prosecuted for that as well, in addition to murder one. But I actually want to go back to what you said a second ago about riots. I mean, Dr. King has that famous line that riots are the language of the unheard. But he goes on to talk about, like, if you want to prevent riots, you need to address systemic racism. You need to address police brutality. Then these things, you can address those things and fix these kinds of problems. But it seems like you get folks who are in power, who are actively choosing to ignore the latter part of that, of the corrective actions that they need to take. And instead you have whether it's a current or former alderman, calling for folks with guns to come in and protect property. But yet you have folks who want to keep bringing up the riot part while ignoring what premeditated the riot. Why are folks so upset? That part's not getting discussed. How many people were called to arms when you had armed folks that went to the state houses all across the country because they were forced to stay home and wear masks and stuff like that, right? But a young brother gets shot 7 times in his back, and it's like, well, wait a minute, now we got to protect property. But back then, it was cool for those white folks to be screaming in the Capitol Police's face, right? None of this is equal. Black folks have been treated poorly, unequally for far too long. And just like LeBron James said, to spare the swear words, because I want to get you in trouble, to summarize it, I am sick of this. There's no way our society should behave in this way. We have come far too far now. I think it's time for folks who honestly want to make a difference and make sure that black folks are treated fairly and equitably, that we need to make some serious and significant changes to the way we operate as a society, because this is not sustainable. And I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we get the right folks in office who are going to value black lives and want to protect black lives as much as they want to, at least as much as they want to protect property. Right now, we don't have those folks in power, and I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to change that dynamic.
I mean, you look at that video of the shooting on Sunday, and I'll tell you, I don't care what the investigation comes out with. There's no justification to shoot a man in the back 7 times.
No.
I'm sorry, I just don't see it, especially when there are 4 cops there. There could have been other means, and we're seeing other videos where, they did a really poor job of trying to detain him from the beginning. I mean, it was botched from the beginning. Clearly, none of those people should have been police officers. But sadly, this is where we are. Kari, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Thanks so much as always.
Anytime, brother. I appreciate you having me on.
Good. Thanks so much, our good friend Kari Pennebaker. Again, this, as he says, this is horribly tragic. And maybe if we'd spend as much time, worried about, as we do about property, worrying about these people's lives, maybe we wouldn't be in this moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You'll listen to The Rick Smith Show. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You'll listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Evidently, former football coach Lou Holtz called Joe Biden a Catholic in name only. And I got to tell you, I find it quite fascinating that, these religious types, who talk about their faith all the time, are doing so about Donald Trump, who I guarantee you has broken every one of those 10 little rules they want plastered on every wall. I'm just saying, I believe he's broken each and every one of them multiple times, and yet you get all of the pious crowd pointing their finger at Joe Biden, who is a guy who does go to mass every week. And the Washington Post reports that the guy actually carries a rosary in his pocket, and has talked about how his faith and his has gotten him through these really hard times. I just find it rather incredible. How low? Where's the bottom in this? And this is one of those weird moments where, at some point, can we get to a place in the country where we no longer question each other's patriotism? It's like Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan tweeted out today that turns out America loves America. Is Americans love America, he says. And I'm going, I thought all Americans loved their country. Now, I don't love what you've done to it, but I love my country. I just don't love what the party formerly known as the GOP has done to it. I just kind of throwing that out there. And that's why we work to change it. One of the things we really love about the country is that, we the people have the ability to take power from people like you, Jim Jordan, and people like Donald Trump, and return it to we the people. Just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. A little fun tidbit today. Donald Trump is calling for drug testing. He wants Joe Biden drug tested. And I'm not entirely against the idea. I am not entirely against the idea. In fact, I've always been in favor of drug testing everyone in Congress, especially our federal judges. Look, if federal employees have to be drug tested, if truck drivers are randomly drug tested for just because, hey, well, we feel like your name came up in the lottery, here's a cup. Maybe we do it to all elected officials and all judges. If you're in a position of power to have influence over other people's lives, maybe we should know if you have a drug problem. I'm actually not against it. Maybe we should know if our president is on drugs, and all of his advisors. I mean, the big thing from Monday night was, Dumb Jr. and the girlfriend were, the thought was they were both coked up. If we had random drug testing to say, look, where I work, you come in looking like that, they hand you a cup. Maybe we hand Dumb Jr. a cup. So I'm not totally against the idea of drug testing. And also, that means Donald would have to be drug tested, and it'd be interesting to see what it is that he's taking. And maybe we'll find out what that thing on top of his head really is. Who knows? But evidently he claims that he's got a sense. He's good with this stuff, he says, because he wants to know why Biden was incompetent during the debates against Bernie, and then he did really well. Which again is just another one of those kind of shots that you want your opponent to respond to, which is just nonsensical. It's like LBJ said that he wanted his opponent to deny having sex with a bull or something like that, just to hear him deny it. This is one of those moments, and Trump does this kind of stuff daily. So Joe Biden, ignore it. It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. But I'm not against the idea of drug testing all of our elected officials and the judges they appoint, especially those 9 or the 5 of them, especially the 5 of the 9 on the Supreme Court. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Top regulatory officials in Trump's government keep chanting the same one-word mantra: deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. Day after day, these agency bosses have been liberating greedy business interests to do their damnedest to us consumers, workers, the environment, and even to our chicken dinner. Yes, chicken. Instead of Kentucky Fried or tacos con pollo, they're serving up chicken a la avian leukosis. That's chicken infected with a virus that produces cancerous tumors and lesions on the birds. In July, the U.S. Agriculture Department's Food Safety and Inspection Service rubber-stamped a demand by Tyson Foods and other multi-billion-dollar meat conglomerates to deregulate chicken processing rules so they can sell chickens diseased with avian leukosis for human consumption. And no, the huge brand-name marketers would not even be burdened by having to put a right-to-know label on the package so we consumers could know what we're buying. As always, the industry line is, "It's perfectly safe. Trust us." No. Their claim is that slaughterhouse line workers can simply cut out any tumors they see, then process the rest of the animal. There are 2 problems with this claim. First, avian leukosis can be a systemic disease passing through the blood, so slicing tumors doesn't necessarily eliminate the virus. Second, line workers don't have time to see tumors, much less remove them, since Trump's corporate-hugging regulators have also allowed poultry factories to speed up their processing lines to 175 birds per minute. This means each worker handles up to 3 chickens a second. As Lyndon Johnson used to say about such political hokum, they can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. To learn more, go to Food and Water Watch, foodandwaterwatch.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the past 2 weeks since Florida began opening up their schools, and look, it's one of these things where we've used the kids of Georgia and now the kids in Florida kind of as guinea pigs for the rest of the country to see, just how bad is it going to be if we reopen. Evidently, over the last 2 weeks in Florida, there have been more than 9,000 students across the state who have tested positive for the coronavirus. I've got nearly 50,000 kids across the state who are confirmed having the virus. And you go, did we know this was going to happen? Of course we did. And as it goes down the road, it's probably going to get much worse. The question then becomes, what do we as parents, what do teachers do? And, well, what do their unions do? And here to share some thoughts on maybe what the rest of the country should learn from not just Georgia and Florida, but other places. I've asked Dr. Michael Flanagan to come talk with us. He's the co-chair of the Badass Teacher Association's blog and research committee. He's got a couple of pieces out I think are interesting to read. One titled "Time for Unions to Take a Stand," and the other, "It's Not Parents versus Teachers, It's Life versus Death." Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
So is it really that dire? Is it really life versus death? Come on, kids are going to get a little sick, get the sniffles, they'll be fine.
Yeah, well, that's what everybody is trying to say. That it depends on who you're listening. If you're listening to the Secretary of Education or the Governor of Florida, they'll give you the statistics that kids don't really carry the virus and they don't really get sick, and 95% of their teachers want to be back in school. But if you listen to, information coming out of the hospitals and through the CDC, if once it gets filtered through the Trump administration, you're seeing thousands and thousands of kids getting sick. And if you're only looking at their quoted 1% fatality, you just said, I think, 50,000 kids sick. So, I mean, what is that? I mean, what's the percentage there? How many people is it going to cost for them to finally say it's too dangerous to have kids in schools right now? It's just not safe enough. That's what it is. And you said it very, very appropriately. We, the rest of the states, I'm in New York, are using Florida and Georgia as, the guinea pig, the canary in the coal mine. We're watching them and their teachers and their students go back early, and we're seeing the numbers come up. And these are quote-unquote red states. These are states where they're trying to suppress the numbers, where they're trying to tell teachers and not to share information about who's sick. The states like I think Tennessee is passing, that you can show up in school even though if you're exposed, if you don't have symptoms. I mean, they're doing a full court press to continue opening, even though there's thousands and thousands of kids and staff getting sick.
So is this that they just don't care about the citizens, they don't care about the kids, or is this really just about November? This is about getting Trump reelected. This is about holding on to power.
Wow. If I wasn't that cynical, I would say it was just about November. But at this point, with all of the information and all of the people who have already died in this country, 175,000 at
almost 180.
180,000 who have died. I can't just say it's about the election anymore. I have to say it's depraved indifference homicide at this point. When you know that as a governor or a secretary of education that you are responsible for not just, testing and curriculum, that you're responsible for the lives of the students and the faculty of your state, and you are forcing schools to reopen in the middle of a worldwide pandemic that has not happened in 100 years, I have to say that is, indifference to human life. It's bigger than just Trump. I mean, Trump is where it started, but when I watched the Secretary of Education from Florida 2 nights ago, sitting or on the Sunday talk shows talking about, this is all nonsense and it's all great, that man does not care about the bodies that are going to be racking up in his state. So
now you've gone even further than you went in your piece. Because you said, in your piece, you said pushing for school reopening for political points and increased Wall Street profits, which is right in line. You're going even further than this. And now we're going depraved indifference. These people, you're now going in my world where none of these people care about any of us. It's not about black lives, not about white lives, blue lives. It's about none of that. They don't give a rat's behind about anybody's lives. That's where you're going. Am I getting
Absolutely. That? Well, those pieces I wrote almost a month ago. And it's gotten uglier since because these schools are now opening now. And, what I thought was going to happen, which we saw in some like Notre Dame closed in a week and North Carolina closed in a week. So you're seeing some colleges and some schools that are forcing themselves closed. But even in the face of that, these governors and are still pushing to open. Look, my mayor in New York City is still touting low rates of coronavirus, and he is pushing to have the blended learning no matter what is like. You have principals that are saying we are not ready to open. You have teachers that are saying we're not ready to open. There was a people's town hall the other night, and it went on till 3:45 in the morning with students and parents and other stakeholders coming on one after the other saying that the school should not be open. There was one person that spoke that said the school should be open. And even in the face of all of that, my mayor, watching Florida, watching Georgia, and this mayor is a Democrat, is still pushing to open up schools. And every other bit of information that comes out like he'll try what I called a Hail Mary pass the other day. He finally came out and said that schools could have classes outside, which is not a bad idea if you have planned for it,
Right.
which we have not. You know, like you would have to try to get like tents, you know, like and the rich schools around where I teach, they have tents on their campuses where their students pay $40,000-$50,000 a year in tuition. They've been having tents out there the entire summer. You know, the schools that I work in and the schools throughout the Bronx and the rest of New York City, we don't have money or time to buy tents to set up on public lands to have outside classes in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And do you even have the land in your area? I mean, you know.
My school, we have a field next to us that we could use, but like I'm a rare exception. You have a lot of schools, it's just in the Bronx, the borough I teach, that like they're lucky if they have a street outside that they can maybe throw up some barricades to block off some traffic. You do not have the resources. And the chancellor says, well, rich PTAs could pool their money. So you're saying 2 weeks before school opens that out of nowhere we can open up, you know, outside spaces to teach? I wrote my principal immediately, and she was like, you know, I can't believe I'm hearing this on the news. We don't have the resources. So we would, you know, I was with it. She was with it. We just can't.
Right.
Can't do it now. These are Hail Mary passes to try to keep force in the schools.
Yeah, maybe this was something that you should have been talking about. Oh, I don't know, since March. Maybe, you know, a plan for the future. You know, maybe having contingency plans. So if we can't reopen, which is something, you know, I've been talking about all summer long. I hope that the school districts were doing the hard work of coming up with what if. Turns out they weren't.
No, they weren't. I mean, I know a lot of teachers that were advocating for outside learning from the beginning. I always had problems with it because I was seeing like the issues that could arise from it, but there were people saying it from March on. And like they're still pushing, like they're training people just this past week to go into schools to check the ventilation systems. And a video was released from New York today of these guys who were like trained by, you know, the Department of Education to go in and check the ventilation systems. And literally they had a yardstick, an alligator clip for like a paper clip, and toilet paper. And they were going up, and I saw the video. It was from Martin Luther King High School in Manhattan. They were going up to these ventilator machines and seeing if the toilet paper moved. So they were in a classroom with no windows, and there were like 6 vents, and like 3 or 4 of them didn't work at all. But they went to one vent, and the toilet paper moved a little, and they checked the box that said that room had ventilation. That is what happened tonight, like about an hour before I'm getting on this phone with you. And they're still trying to open up the schools.
And that you know, it may have some ventilation, but is it recirculating the same?
Of course it is.
The same
And they don't
contaminated
have-
air. I mean, this is part of the problem. I mean, especially when you're talking about schools that don't have the resources as the wealthier schools do to have HIPAA filters and all those things in there that help clean the air. These are units that are old. I mean, if you've got them working at all, as you pointed out.
Teachers are talking about mold. You know, it takes 2 years, as my friend said, to get a new shade for her windows. You know what I mean? Like, it's you know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you know, and what I had written in the piece was the unions need to step up. And since I wrote that, I can say the unions have moved more in different states. And in New York, our UFT said basically that we would strike if the schools were not safe when we reopened. And in New York, we have, like similar states, we have laws where public employees are not supposed to strike. So it's huge fines and things like that. But this is a OSHA issue. This is a school safety issue. We're not striking or threatening to strike for wages and benefits. We're looking for safe working conditions.
Right. As you point out, life or death. And as you pointed out in the one article, and it was in a line that I thought was, one of those, yeah, duh. You wrote, if we're discussing morgue trucks being sent to the same cities where schools are set to reopen in a matter of days, then we should not be having that conversation at all. And I'm going, yeah, I mean, if you've got, like in Florida, if you've got, refrigerated trailers hanging around waiting for the surplus dead, maybe sending our kids back into a dangerous environment, not the greatest idea.
Right. I wrote that about Texas. When I was writing that piece, Texas was calling for morgue trucks, and they were opening up the schools, and it was happening in the same week. And I'm like, shouldn't be having those two conversations. And why I wrote the piece about the it's not parents versus teachers is because that seems to me what the administrations, not just the president, but like state administrations, both Republican and Democrat, are trying to set it up as. They want to push it to make it a district decision, and then they're trying to put pressure on the parents, saying you have to go to work, and why should you be home, teaching your kids while these teachers are too scared to go in, and to the teachers, they're like, doctors and nurses and grocery clerks can go in, why can't you go in? They're trying to set it up to be teachers versus parents so they can deflect from the pressure that they're putting on to open up the schools. And my point is teachers are parents. We are. I have a kid that goes to school too, and I'm not sending her because I know what it's going to be like in the buildings for her. I'll go in because I have to, and I'm not getting medical exclusions and things like that. But, like, if I have any choice in the world, I am not sending my kid to these schools during a pandemic. It is not the teacher's fault. It's not the parents' fault. It's the virus's fault. This is a natural disaster. It is not, teachers don't want to work, parents don't want to send kids. It's something we have to address. If it was an earthquake or a hurricane, we would address it. This is a pandemic. You can't just send your kids in because you want to. Okay, and even if they go there, there's going to be so many restrictions on them to try to prevent them from getting sick that it's not really even going to be like school. They're not going to be able to socialize. They can't sit together. They can't play together. They can't even eat in the same cafeteria. They have to eat in classrooms, enclosed classrooms with maybe 1 or 2 vents or a small window that opens maybe 3 or 4 inches. And 12 or 14 of them have to sit and eat their lunch in the same room that they do in schoolwork in. That's what you're sending the kids back to. It's not parents versus teachers.
Yeah.
It's life versus death.
Yeah, we're most certainly in an interesting time. But if you've been paying attention to the RNC or what was formerly the Republican Party's convention, I get the sense that they believe it's all behind us. The messaging that I'm seeing come out of it is, we won. Donald Trump did a great job on the virus. Thank goodness for Donald Trump. But it's passed, and I'm talking to a lot of people who think, well, there's going to be a vaccine soon. It's not going to be a big deal. It hasn't really been bad lately. Yeah, what the hell? Send the kids.
Yeah, well, I'm not watching the RNC. But I was wondering if it's all passed. Like, when is Herman Cain speaking? Like, when is he talking? If it's all passed, you know what I mean? Because I noticed he's not on
that's cold.
the speaking agenda. It is cold, but like that's what they're saying, right? He was at the rally with Trump, not wearing a mask, and you know what? He's not at the RNC now. So you're going to send my kids and our kids back to school because you want to have a rally? You want to say that Donald Trump did better? Okay, there are people dying as we speak, and our kids are not an experiment, right, for some political, propaganda. Okay, we need to look. I'm a teacher. Okay, I love to teach. I love to be in the classroom, but the safety comes first. Okay, and if kids are in a room where there's an inkling that any kid next to you or any staff member walking by you may get you sick, and you may go home and your mom or your dad or your grandmother may get sick and die from that, we should not be sending those kids to school at this time.
So
That's my opinion.
You don't think there's any way of of doing the social distancing and with the masks. Even here in Pennsylvania, they're talking about mask breaks. You don't see any way of doing this to where kids can go to school and be safe and teachers can be safe. There's no way to, in your view, to keep the teachers safe.
There is a way, but forcing it because you have this arbitrary opening date of late August, early September, and you're saying everything will be ready and the ventilation will be ready and we're all going to clean and we're all going to, if it's well thought out, if it's, if there's like one of the things that the UFT, my union, United Federation of Teachers, is talking about, their thing is that we need like testing of everyone. Before we go in, everybody should get tested. So you're looking at, even with the people who stay home, you're looking at maybe 800,000 people, students and staff that'll be coming just in New York City schools alone. That's an enormous amount of testing.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, if we wanted to do the social distancing, like safely, like where it would work, everybody would need to be tested. We're still waiting 10 to 14 days for test results. So you got kids that are coming back from Dominican Republic, Florida, all over the country, coming back after summer vacation to these hot spots where they're supposed to be quarantining. No one's quarantining. They're going to show up September 10th, and it's going to explode, and we're going to be closed in a week, and God knows how many people are going to pay the price from that. So can we open it? Yes, if it's done safely with time and clarity of thought. This is not. This is haphazard to try to get it in by September 10th.
There you go. Dr. Flanagan, I appreciate the time. Hope people will take a look at the pieces. Time for unions to take a stand, and it's not parents versus teachers. It's life or death, written by Dr. Michael Flanagan. We'll get links out. Michael, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rick. Have a great night.
You too. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Laura is forecast to strengthen, possibly into a major hurricane, before making landfall along the Texas or Louisiana coast.
Twin storms pummel the Gulf Coast. Northern California fires rage out of control. Plus,
we can and we will deal with climate change.
2020 Democratic National Convention touts climate action.
All of that touting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Trump administration finalized plans to open up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. It marks a major step towards reviving fossil fuel development in an area that has been untouched for 3 decades.
Untouched for 3 decades. For a second, I thought they were talking about Mike Pence.
Oh, snap.
Bing, 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 bing.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you have long warned about multiple disasters happening all at once, and that doesn't even include the Republican National Convention.
This is true, and here we are. Multiple simultaneous disasters, storms and wildfires, and a pandemic all at once. First, 2 storms are hitting the United States Gulf Coast in the span of just 48 hours. It's extremely rare to have 2 storms simultaneously churning in the Gulf. Hurricane Marco hit Louisiana as a tropical storm on Monday, bringing heavy rains and flooding. And as we go to air, Laura is now a serious threat to Louisiana and Texas, likely to hit midweek. In a press conference, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards warned that the state's emergency response is already strained by the pandemic, and residents should not get complacent.
The temporal proximity and the geographic proximity of these storms pose a challenge that, quite frankly, we've not seen before. And as a result, we don't know exactly what to expect.
The National Hurricane Center warns that no matter where Laura ultimately makes landfall, quote, winds, storm surge, and rainfall hazards will extend far from the center. And yes, man-made climate change does play a role, according to Washington Post weather editor Andrew Friedman on PBS NewsHour.
The Atlantic Sea surface temperatures are so much warmer than average right now. So instead of giving just regular gasoline to these storms, you're essentially giving them rocket fuel.
Bam, 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 bam. Meanwhile, a state of emergency in California where more than 1 million acres have burned, driven by extreme heat and high winds. In just 1 week, 2 fires in Northern California exploded into the second and third largest fires in the state's history. State officials say they are struggling to combat the unprecedented number of fires across the state. There's not enough equipment or personnel to fight them. Plus, the coronavirus pandemic has curtailed the number of state prisoners that are available to man fire crews.
And I suspect the coronavirus pandemic has also limited the number of shelters, whether it's the fires in California or the storms down in the Gulf Coast, shelters that people can safely go to and social distance within.
And yes, the storms that exploded over the past few days in California and Colorado show clear influences of man-made global warming. Multiple lines of evidence show how a warming and drying climate is increasing the size and severity of fires throughout the United States West.
Yeah, but Donald Trump said it was because we didn't rake the leaves in our forest floors here in California.
Yeah, he keeps saying that. I think he needs to come up with some new insane material.
Oh, that's not insane enough?
Action on man-made climate change was woven throughout the Democratic National Convention to formally nominate Joe Biden for president last week. In his acceptance speech, Biden placed climate among the top 4 of the biggest issues facing the nation, along with the pandemic, the economy, and systemic racism. Biden has proposed a comprehensive $2 trillion plan to solve the climate crisis and lift the U.S. economy out of the downturn that has been caused by the coronavirus pandemic and create new jobs by transitioning the nation to clean energy no later than 2050.
We can and we will deal with climate change. It's not only a crisis, it's an enormous opportunity. An opportunity for America to lead the world in clean energy and create millions of new, good-paying jobs in the process.
Finally, some strange but good news in Alaska. Just weeks after releasing an environmental report minimizing the impact of the controversial proposed Pebble mine, the Trump administration on Monday suddenly paused the permitting process, giving the mine's developers 90 days to explain how they would offset damage to the world's most prolific salmon fishery. Apparently, Trump's son, Don Jr., and a few Fox News personalities have been lobbying for the change.
Well, I guess that's all it takes. If Fox News is against it, so is Donald Trump. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. We're on a truncated...
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a lot of people up in arms over Trump's use of the White House and Melania Trump's speech from the Rose Garden. And my only question was, did he pay? Does he have to pay for any of that? While Joe Biden and the Democrats, used different convention centers that they paid for, that their campaigns paid for. Does Trump have to reimburse we the taxpayer for the use of our facilities for the campaign? That's my only concern. Look, I get the fact that he wants the door opened by Marines and salutes and wants to emulate Putin. I get that. Makes for nice photo ops, but I think we should be reimbursed. Just my thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Also, the big RNC Hate Fest, or as I've been calling it, the party formerly known as the Republicans Hate Fest. Our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. My pleasure.
So, should we be up in arms that they used the not just the White House, but a pardon and a naturalization ceremony and all kinds of stuff that are generally the pomp and circumstance of the office specifically for their convention? Should we be upset about that?
Well, I think if they didn't pay for the political part, they actually are exempt, the president and vice president, from certain uses that maybe, for example, a member of Congress couldn't get away with. For example, a re-election broadcast live from your office in the Capitol. You couldn't. But as I understood what I read yesterday about the actual word of the law, they're not in violation, but the spirit of the law, obviously, is in question. Now, here's where they could be in direct violation, though. The utilization of federal property, and if they've got campaign people there directing things, that has to be paid for by the campaign. If they use certain federal workers, time is used, and it's campaign related, that I think would have to be paid by the campaign. I don't know, if they're going to do that, they could. You don't know if they're going to write a check. I don't know yet.
No.
I'm sure somebody's going to ask that question.
No, this is Donald Trump. He's going to stiff us like he stiffed everybody else. So I'm not surprised, because look, ask any of those police departments down in Florida who have had to spend huge amounts of money on overtime every time he comes to play golf, how much they've been reimbursed over the last couple of years.
Right.
So assessment of night two.
I thought there'd actually be a little bit, by the way, before we move on to that, I thought there'd be a little bit more outcry about the use of the White House, but it kind of came and went.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Yeah.
I actually don't have a problem with it to a certain degree. I know the power of incumbency. I get all of that. At the end of the day, this is where the guy lives. I mean, we've said here, this is your house. This is where you live for now. I don't know.
I mean, a member of Congress, for example, they can stand in front of the Capitol, use the Capitol in their brochures. You can do that. You can't film inside the Capitol, but you could use the Capitol per se.
Here's the thing. There are so many other things.
Right. I know.
I mean,
know where you're
the
going.
list of grievances I have with this administration
are beyond the White House.
Are so extensive that this doesn't even register for me. Right. I mean, this is one of those things you go, of course he's going to violate the spirit of the law, because he's breaking all of the other laws. So why would we be surprised that he's breaking the spirit of the law?
Mm-hmm.
So let me get your thoughts, your assessment of night two. Night one was all about, MS-13 going to be invited to live next door, and they're gonna crush the suburbs and all of that. Night two, a little different tone.
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting what they did. Of course, the First Lady spoke. I think that Bette Midler plays into everybody's hands in the Trump campaign with what she did, frankly. But I'm not Bette Midler's older brother or anything. So, but the First Lady spoke, and then they had Pompeo in there from Jerusalem, which is obviously being in Jerusalem was pretty good for having him beam in, with the Jewish voters. So they kind of had that kind of down, I thought. And it was a better night. It was a better night. They had the immigration swearing-in ceremony. The president did pretty good on pronouncing the names. He really did.
Yeah.
They had to work some overtime with him, but he got that one down.
Sure, he practiced a little bit. So this tells us this is important to him.
This is a kind of a new wave here. But I did think that they had, for the most part, a blend here and there of a little softer type of night. I thought the second night was better than the first. I still don't think there's going to be a bump out of this entire thing, but the good news for the Trump campaign is it's not going to go down as a result of this.
Right.
Well, we've got a couple nights to go. Let's see. But I think in general, if it continues.
And again, Trump, made it, I guess it is about him. It's his coronation.
It is. Yeah.
But very bizarre, again, of how much he has played into this. The pardon thing, I I've asked this before, but has anything like that ever been done during a convention? I know, look, past administrations have done things to pander to certain segments of the population, right, and then they tout that. But has it ever been done like right there in time?
No, I've been to enough conventions, and I'm thinking back in the history of a few I've missed. No, I don't think that has been done. I really don't. Some people have spoken at conventions and went to prison, but I don't recall anybody that this has been done during a convention. No, I just don't remember anything like that.
Yeah, it was really kind of bizarre. And I mean, the weird thing is, and this is one of these moments where you go, I look at that and I'm not against what he did.
Right.
Pardoning this guy, I think, is a great thing. This guy got his life together. To highlight the fact that they're helping others, and we're getting people out of prison and reacclimating them to society, and that they're succeeding. I think that's a great thing. But to do that with one hand while with the other stoking the kind of race baiting that we saw Monday night, and stoking the flames of division, and basically pouring gasoline on what's happening in our cities across this country. It's just this weird kind of schizophrenic position that I'm still trying to figure out and wrap my head around what the point that he's making is.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the history for 4 years of what's said versus what's done, and look, I would be the last. I never ever picked on Michelle Obama, and I wouldn't pick on Melania Trump, Melania. I mean, but she's got the anti-bullying campaign. And the president is no wallflower. Seriously, I mean, the president reminds you of the type of guy. If you went to lunch with him and you went sort of sideways on the conversation with him, he'd kind of bully you at the table. And so she's got this anti-bullying campaign. Now that doesn't make her in itself a bad person or something, but on one hand, he bullies, and on the other hand, she's got the anti-bullying campaign.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, I guess, is what I'm saying, of what one says versus what one does in this instance. Because don't you think, I thought about this, and I think Biden first got caught in this early on in the campaign, and he learned his lesson in a sense. If you do something and the press says, well, and this is what has worked for Trump, whether it's right or wrong or not nice, but, the press says, well, you did this, and you say, well, yeah, I did. And then they keep going with it.
Yep.
And then you apologize, and then they keep going with it. And they were doing that to Biden at first. And then Biden kind of got smart and said, hey, I said what I said, and move on. Well, with the president, it's hard to stand there and show him a video and say, you said this, when he'll say, that's fake news.
No, it's an excellent point. And, on the Biden front, I had former Congressman Joe Walsh on last night, and, and he hit on the that the Democrats didn't address the rioting, and they really didn't in their convention, but they did make a statement. And to go to your point, they made their statement. This is what it is. We're not going to harp on it. We're not going to continue to go back over it. And I think you're right. I think Biden learned his lesson to stop apologizing.
Right, because early on, I can't really remember the issue, he started on something. And, man, something for 25 years ago,
right.
Whatever. And they just wouldn't let it go. And again, you can come out and say, hey, I made a mistake, I've changed my mind, I'm a different person, whatever you want to say. But then if you continue to try to, counter the media, they'll endlessly rip you apart. And I think the White House has this down to a doctorate degree. Of what they just say, well, no, I'm watching that video, but that's not it. That's not what it says.
I just don't care. I mean,
right.
Trump literally can say one thing one minute and complete opposite the next minute, which is, again, I guess is why the Republican Party, or the party formerly known as the Republican Party, decided that no platform. Whatever dear leader wants. We're not going to bother writing something down because he's not going to go by it anyway.
Right. Well, this is one of the having been in the Congress under two presidents, and watching the Democratic side, with Clinton, and watching the Republican side with Bush. There were times where they didn't like some of the things that Bush did or whatever, and you had the Republican Party itself and the National Committee. This time, it's just not that way. A lot of members, some may be different, but most members are afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
They're afraid because he will come after you in your district.
That kind of vengeful, and
he will. Sure, he'll come after you.
And hopefully, and this is one of those moments where you go, hopefully, if he does get ousted in November, maybe some of that can heal. Maybe we can start, getting rid of some of those folks as well, and maybe we come back towards insanity. But here's the thing: I'm of the mindset I don't know that he's going to lose. I mean, I keep looking at the numbers. I keep looking at some of the polling data from some battleground states. You would think, given all of the stuff that's been going on, the virus, the economy taking a dive, all of this stuff, he'd be getting just brutalized, but not so much.
Well, it goes to my mind back to Hillary Clinton, and I had predicted, and Ellen Ratner at the time, she was with Talk Media News, and we both had predicted Trump would win. The other 9 employees of Talk Media News predicted Hillary Clinton. And one of the employees called me up and said, "How could you predict that?" I said, "Because that's my job. I don't care what you think personally of Hillary or Donald Trump. It's our job to predict what we actually think is going to happen, right? Not the personal side of it." But we had predicted that, and then the tape came out. And I remember some radio stations in Vermont the next morning said, "Well, Bob, did you change your mind?" I said, "No." They said, "How could you say that?" I said, "Because the tape came out and Hillary went up 3 points. Think about that. She should have went up 55 points, right?"
Yep.
So there's certain indicators there, and I agree with you. I mean, this is not over with yet, but after all of this, after all the shouting is done, the fact of where he is at right now, says that this is going to narrow and be a horse race.
No,
that's what's going to happen.
No, and my fear is a couple of things. One, if you look at what he's presenting during the convention, it is all about fear. It's about scaring the hell out of middle America, and getting them to vote not on kitchen table economics and not on how their life is going, but on the fear that Joe Biden really will crush the suburbs and MS-13 will be invited to live next door to you. And also that taxes are going to go way up, and you're going to have to support those others. Trump has done a masterful job of spreading that, but also I fear that with all of the stuff that's going to go on with the mail-in ballots and all the legal challenges and all the stuff, I wonder, do we end up back in front of the Supreme Court?
Well, I think this is whoever wins. I really hope they win significantly. I really do.
Yeah.
For the sake of America. But today, and this is not, I'm not trying to stereotype statistically the whole country, but I was in shock today. I went over to the mall, and a lady who I have known for quite a long time, who cannot stand Donald Trump, did not vote for him last time, very kind of calmly today brought up the topic about, who did I think would win and things like that. And she said, well, I can't stand him. He's an idiot. He's a buffoon. But so I probably am going to vote for him. And my jaw dropped, and I said, why? She said, well, I'm just afraid Joe Biden's going to let, these people get out of control, and they're going to come to our city and burn things. They're going to do what they want. And I was seriously flabbergasted that this reaches all the way down.
Wow. And
again, it's not an isolated case. I've been hearing this. I have friends across the country that are not committed to anybody, and I call, and there's always this little thing about, I don't know what Joe Biden's going to do to us. They don't like Trump, but they don't know.
Right.
So, they're trying to paint them as the leftist, Marxist, dangerous people, and we'll see if they're going to be effective with it.
Yeah, but look, I've known Biden over the years, and I've followed his career, obviously, as you have as well. He's not the socialist leftist. As a progressive, as a liberal myself, I'm not fond of the fact that he's not far enough left. And you're saying that these people are going, oh no, he's so far to the left. I see Biden as someone who's going to work within the system. We'll tinker around the edges, maybe some, do some things around the fringe, but I don't see radical change coming.
I actually, it's funny you mentioned it. I actually responded to the lady. I said, I know Joe Biden. She said, I thought you would. And I said, he's one of the nicest guys that you could meet. He's went through a lot. I actually said these things to her, and she didn't care. It didn't matter what I said. She's suspicious. And, I know how Joe Biden operates. You do too. After the election, he will become a centrist. He'll do a few things, don't get me wrong, but he's going to become a centrist. And he'll, have, I think, some labor platforms and health care, and he'll redo the Iran nuclear deal and some things like that. Nobody's more schooled in foreign affairs in that entire Senate than Joe Biden.
Right.
But as I told the lady today, he's not that type of guy. Well, he's being influenced. And I said, well, I just don't think he. I said, my progressive friends get angry at me when I tell them he'll go centrist. He will not. I said, well, okay.
No, look, I'm as liberal as anybody, and I know what he's going to do. This will be the third Obama term, in my view. I think he will be exactly as Obama was, without some of the really good speeches.
Right. Yes, you're right.
But I think policy-wise, I don't think you're going to see anything crazy.
He'll bring back some calmness and stability, and like you said, he won't be on Twitter, and some of those things. People will kind of feel things are going back to some normalcy. They may not like him in particular, but they'll feel not all the constant battle chaos.
He will be a more traditional, what we've known throughout our lifetimes. He will be a more traditional president, and it'll make my job an awful lot harder because
I know.
There won't be insanity, everything burning every day, being shot in the face with a fire hose every day of insanity from the White House, which again will make this job harder, but I'll sleep better at night.
I used to think to myself when I first started with Talk Media News and Obama was president, and Bush was president for 1 year, but Obama was president, and I would have to, don't get me wrong, I'd have Obama stories, but I would have to really kind of surf for news, because there were other things going on. Yeah. Now you just open the computer and type Trump. And, there's basically your format for the day.
No, you just go right to his Twitter feed. I mean, it's not even that. Go right to the Twitter feed.
Right.
Crazy. And finally, we've been talking about this for the last couple of days, but I guess the Nobel Peace Prize is on hold. I guess we're not going to have. Are we going to have the big signing ceremony at the White House? Will the Middle East peace process that Kush has put together, will we get something of a display even if we don't actually get a peace plan?
Well, what they're going to work on, they're going to do their darndest to get some kind of photo op. And, of course, we went through Kim Jong-un, which at one point in time I thought, hey, if Trump pulls that off, he is going to be highlighted, for when that fell apart for a peace prize. That fell apart. But with the United Arab Emirates and the deal with Israel, here's what's technically going forward. Jared Kushner is going to be on a flight from Tel Aviv. I think it's tomorrow or something. He's going to be on a flight from Tel Aviv to the United Arab Emirates, which is kingdoms of, 7 kingdoms of these kings that are united together. And he's going to be on the first flight. So that's going on. They have formed a board, by the way, of which I actually know somebody on the board, a Jewish friend of mine. And they formed this board, and it's all economically, oriented. But when you and I talked about this on your show, we knew this was not a Palestinian peace deal, which is what they're saying it is, because the Palestinians aren't involved, because United Arab Emirates are not Palestinians. So now Netanyahu has said, well, he's against the arms sales. Well, I think he probably privately signed off on it anyway. The United Arab Emirates are now saying, well, we're not going to have this trilateral meeting with Israel and the United States right now until Netanyahu kind of backs off. They want F-35s. They want the United Arab Emirates to fight, quote, Iran. And, of course, all you have to say to the Trump administration, we're going to fight Iran, and you'll get what you want. So it's a deal. It wasn't Palestinians. It's not about annexation. This is about military equipment, hardware. So I think probably Kushner's really, really going to push Netanyahu for some kind of, indirect sign-off. They want some kind of photo op. And honestly, Rick, they should let it lay alone, because it's not a Palestinian. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to happen, by the way, but it's not a Palestinian peace deal.
Yeah, it's just us selling more guns.
Not true. Right.
And what could possibly go wrong with that?
Right. Yeah, like Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yeah, well, what could possibly go wrong with putting guns into unstable people's hands? What could possibly go wrong giving a 17-year-old kid an AR-15? What could possibly go wrong, Bob?
Right, and jets with bombs.
It's crazy, just crazy times.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, I appreciate the time as
Thank
always.
You, Rick.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people on the talk.
saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1839. That was the day that the Amistad sailed into Long Island, New York. The Amistad served as a Spanish slave ship. 53 captives, led by an enslaved rice farmer by the name of Joseph Sink, had revolted against their captors and taken control of the ship. They came from what is now Sierra Leone, Africa. They had endured the brutal Middle Passage on a Portuguese slave ship, the Tacora. They had landed in Havana, Cuba, where they were transferred to the Amistad. From there, they were supposed to sail to a Cuban sugar plantation. The transaction was illegal. Most of the major slave destinations in North and South America had outlawed bringing in newly enslaved people. But since existing slave labor was still used in these areas, the illegal slave trade continued. On July 2nd, the African captives escaped their chains and set upon their captors before they could load their guns. They killed the ship's captain. The Africans demanded to be returned to Sierra Leone. The U.S. Navy intercepted the Amistad as it sailed up the U.S. coast. The Africans were thrown into prison and charged with murder. The case garnered national attention and made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Former President John Quincy Adams presented the defense for the accused. The court found in favor of the Africans. 35 were returned home. The others had died while incarcerated or at sea. The Amistad became the subject of a 1997 film by Steven Spielberg. And while the Amistad became famous, it was not the only one. Similar uprisings were attempted on hundreds of slave ships during this era. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like the CDC is, you almost, this is one of those moments where you go, seriously? We're going to narrow the number of people that we test for the virus. We're going to do exactly what Trump wanted. Now remember, Trump said a while ago, we just need to stop testing so much. And if you've been paying attention to the convention, they've already moved beyond it. They're going to let whatever happens happen. Their focus is solely on re-election, not on leading. Their focus is solely on getting us to think past the virus and past all of the effects that have happened. Because, look, from the beginning, they failed on it. Had they done the right thing at the beginning, they'd have been saying, hey, look at how wonderful we did. Well, what they're doing now is they're taking credit for how wonderful they should have done, making us try to think that it's not a problem anymore. And now narrowing the number of tests that are happening, because look, he's not wrong when he says if we cut down the number of tests, we'll cut down the number of people being tested positive. Duh. If you don't test anybody, nobody's positive. Doesn't mean no one has it. It just means we have no positive test results. That is not wrong. But we now find out that the CDC is going to narrow some of their guidelines, which, from what I've been reading, potentially people are most contagious in the asymptomatic stage. Before you know you got it is when you're probably most contagious, because look, you're breathing normally, you're functioning normally, you're out and about normally. Generally, when you're sick and dragging, you're probably home in bed, whatever. This is not good. This is not a good thing. But we now find out that, according to Dr. Anthony Fauci, all of this stuff was done while he was in surgery. Evidently, he was having some work done on his vocal cords, and according to him, this stuff all came out last Thursday when he was under anesthesia. And you just kind of go, really? They're really going to go that kind of backdoor? Now, the guy who is the testing czar, this Admiral Brett Garrer, he's denied the reports. He's saying, no, this doesn't happen. The White House didn't tell the CDC to do anything. They didn't say it. No, it's wrong. We would never do that. Only the president has said it, publicly. So this is another one of those moments where, as Bob was saying, you could show them the tape of this is what you said. Fake news, fake news, fake news. Of which, we've gotten a steady diet of that during the convention thus far, haven't we? It's all fake news. It's all bad. It's all the media's fault. It was the media's fault that we didn't respond to the virus right away. It's the media's fault that we're not testing people who are asymptomatic. Yeah, this is scary times. Now, Trump is rolling the dice. Look, his only path to re-election, because the last 3.5 years have really been chaotic and crazy. But his only path towards re-election is scaring white people to going, MS-13 is moving next door, and it's all about the blacks. Those black people are going to move in next year, which was all about the crushing of HUD's Section 8 plan. Now no more moving those people into the suburbs. This is about scaring white people against black people. This is about that division. And what's interesting is his support among Latinos has actually gone up. And one of the justifications that I saw that, make it interesting is that the Latino community is now going, well, he's not attacking us anymore. He's attacking them, which again is quite interesting. Because, look, we've, as a country, and I've said this a million times before, we've been sliced and diced and pitted against one another. To the point to where, when we get a little respite, when they're going after the other, we kind of take a break. Not beating us up now. This is kind of how I see the Latino vote going up for Trump a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. And to me, that's all it's going to take. It's just got to be close enough. This election for Trump to win has just got to be close enough that all of the things that they're doing to steal it, all of the voter suppression, all of the cross-check, kicking people off the voting rolls, all of the challenging mail-in ballots. Because look, again, he's not wrong when almost a quarter of the ballots that are cast via mail are thrown out for one technical reason or another. And understand, they're going to have just armies of lawyers ensuring that everything has to be absolutely picture perfect. So follow the guidelines, follow the instructions. And for white guys, read the instructions. If you're going to vote by mail, read the instructions, especially if you're going to vote for Biden. But yeah, I mean, if it's close, I do think they're going to steal it. I think it's going to be that simple because they've laid the groundwork. We go, but Rick, you're saying they're going to steal it? No, they've rigged the rules of the game. And let me put it a little differently. They're not going to walk in and stuff it in their coat pocket. They're not going to do that. They've already rigged the rules of the road. They've already rigged how the parameters are being set to where they can make the legal justification that, hey, we've passed these rules, and the rules say that if you use a check mark instead of filling in the bubble, it's tossed. They've already set the rules. They're already pursuing the cross-check. They're already purging the voting rolls. It's our responsibility to be much more diligent, to be much more on point, and to make sure you're registered. Check to make sure that you are registered to vote. Check a couple of times between now and November, because you never know. You never know what they're going to do. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Would love to hear your thoughts on the cavalcade of crazy of the last couple of nights. Fear Fest 2020. the convention, otherwise formerly known as the RNC. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a lot of people up in arms over Trump's use of the White House and Melania Trump's speech from the Rose Garden. And my only question was, did he pay? Does he have to pay for any of that? While